everybody. Welcome to the Echo Leadership Podcast. My name is Andy Wood, and we are so thrilled that you are here joining us today. Thanks for being a part of the greater Echo Leadership Tribe. We have business leaders, entrepreneurs, church leaders. Most of our leaders are joining us from the Bay Area, but we also have leaders all over the country and all over the world. And we want to say thanks to those of you who are sharing this content with others, those of you who have subscribed, those of you who are getting the word out. Our goal is to help leaders get better. So every time we're together, we want to help you get a little bit better. We're going to have a fantastic conversation with Sue Warnke. She's an executive at Salesforce. Not only is she an executive there, but within Salesforce, she started an organization called Faithforce. It began as a prayer meeting. It grew, it blossomed, and she has a lot on her plate, from being executive to nonprofit work. She does a lot of speaking. She speaks for churches to help them integrate faith with their work, and how Christians or followers of Jesus can be wise with their words and lead in such a way that doesn't unnecessarily push people away from the message of Jesus. More than just that, she has so much wisdom to offer us. And so in this conversation, we're going to talk about how she makes decisions. We're going to talk about how she cuts things out of her life that are not helping her, the toxic stuff that doesn't help her accomplish the vision that she has in her heart. It's going to be a great episode. I want to encourage you, listen in, take some notes, and I believe that you're going to be blessed. You're going to get better through this episode with Sue Warnke. I'm here today with Sue Warnke, and it is a privilege to learn from you. Thank you so much for making this time available to invest in us as leaders.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here, Andy.
And Sue, tell us a little bit about yourself and what your role is. I know you work for Salesforce, and you got a lot of other things going on as well.
Yeah, so I'm a technology documentation leader at Salesforce. I've been in the tech industry for about 20 years. I lead teams of writers and engineers there. I was also part of the team that founded Faithforce, which is Salesforce's faith diversity ERG. And I do workshops and speak around the country about faith inclusion.
That's awesome. And one of the things I know that you have been kind of piloting and you've put out there is a podcast or a blog that you call leadership.org. And we had some great conversations about the difference between leadership and leadership. And I'd love for you to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, leadership, we know is sort of charging ahead, making decisions, driving results. And, I ended up converting to Christianity, much to my surprise, about 4 years ago. And one of the biggest things that I learned is that you can lean on something bigger than yourself, that you don't have to be actually driving everything. So most of my philosophy is geared around that you can lean not only on the support of something bigger than yourself, but on the direction. So that's what leadership is about.
That's great. And there's a lot of articles there, even some videos of some teaching that you've done. And one of the cool things it seems like has happened is you're helping churches and organizations bridge faith and the workforce. And talk a little bit about that, what you're doing there.
Yeah, I mean, the reality of what it's like in the workforce to be a person of faith, to be somebody exploring faith even, is different sometimes than what we learn at church. And so what I do is I work with folks to just convey what the kind of day-to-day reality is and how you can integrate faith into that environment.
It's incredible. Well, today I'm excited to talk with you about this concept that you've put together. It's the 4 T's that you use to prioritize your time. And I found them to be really helpful as I was kind of reading and processing through this. So I'd love to dive in and start and talk through the 4 buckets. I know that you kind of put this in almost like 4 boxes that you would describe. So let's start just kind of with the general idea of how you use these 4 T's to prioritize your time.
Sure. So as I mentioned, I'm in the software industry. So when we're building software and fixing software, we bucket all work into 4 priorities, P1, 2, 3, and 4. And we almost never get to the 3s and 4s. And that's a good thing, we think, because you've got a limited amount of time. What should you focus on? You should focus on the things that are going to have the biggest business impact, the best results for customers. And that gets us to innovate a lot more. So I apply that to my life as well. I think everything that confronts us in our life can be bucketed into P1, P2, P3, P4 for priority. And I try to only do the P1s and 2s because there's problems with the 3s and 4s, which we'll get into. But I call those categories the 4 T's. So priority 1 is true. So these are things that are, really aligned with your values. You have to do them. That's your purpose in life. 2 is tough, which is the things that are hard to do, but you can't delegate them. You need to do them. You may not love them, but you need to do them. 3 is tempting, which are a lot of the things that we do that maybe we shouldn't do. And then 4 is toxic, which are the things that you have to urgently get out of your life.
Yeah, that's good. So talk about how you, with the first category, the true, how you've created that. And I know that takes both your personal life and your business, like your organizational work, and pulled that together. Like, was that a retreat you went on, or is this something that just kind of like emerged for you over time? How did you get conviction around that first priority?
Yeah, a lot of it is through prayer, honestly. I think before I had prayer in my life, I would be a little scattered. I'd be just like charge into the day and assume all sorts of priorities. But now with prayer, I do spend a lot of time in the morning, at least, an hour, half an hour to an hour, reflecting on the day, reflecting on my values. All of the items in True are based on my core values. And what comes to light is what I should focus on. So a lot of it comes through prayer. But even without prayer, I think you can start with identifying your core values, and you can use all sorts of programs to do like a value assessment. But for me, that would be my faith, my family. And then I love transformation. I feel like I'm on this earth to help kind of bring a voice to people that don't have a voice.
That's good. So what does that look like for you when you kind of take that and you boil it down to every week? Like, how do you discern that in your day, your schedule, your meetings? How's that playing out for you?
So, it might come down to in the old days, my daughter had a tennis match. We don't do that with COVID, but that would be a P1. That would clearly be a P1, and I would know it because it matches with my family value. Not everything in ministry matches to P1, but certain things do. So prayer for me is always a P1, and that aligns with my faith value. Transformation. So if somebody people reach out to me from different companies and say, hey, I'm thinking of starting a faith group at my company, or, hey, I'm facing this discrimination or conflict at my company. Can I talk to you? That often becomes a P1 because I align it with that transformation value and that purpose that I feel that I'm here for. And then certain things don't. And then I kind of push them away. But I do try to make time in a structured way for those P1s.
That's great. Do you set priorities on a weekly basis with your work? Like couple top priorities?
Well, we have some really cool prioritization tools at Salesforce. We call it our V2 Mom. You can Google that. It's a kind of industry tool for planning. And what that does is it gets us aligned on our priorities. I mean, on a weekly, on a daily, on a monthly basis. So we've got those tools. So I do know generally, like, what are the big ticket items that I'm accountable for in a given week.
That's good. So let's come to that second bucket, the tough. Have you ever heard the concept of eat the frog?
Yes.
It's like an old Brian Tracy phrase. It seems a little bit like this is kind of a similar concept, that there are just some things that you have to get done. Talk about what that looks like for you. Like, what are some of the proverbial, like, change the diaper? Like, my wife and I, we've talked about this, having 3 kids, like somebody's got to change the diaper. What are some of those things that you feel like fall in that group, that category, that you can't just delegate to other people?
Yeah. Unfortunately, exercise would be kind of an obvious one. And I have 3 kids as well. Mine are teenagers now, but I know there's all sorts of family tasks that you can't delegate. You can't delegate time with your kids. You can't delegate that type of thing. On the work front, I would put learning in that category. There's reorganizations all the time. There's new projects all of the time. And it's pretty intense. Being assigned to a brand new, really complicated technical project is overwhelming. Yeah. And I wish I could just take a pill and learn it all, but I have to go through that hard work of analysis and listening and all of that to really understand that product. So that's the type of stuff that falls under tough. I don't want to do them often, but I know that I have to, and I can't delegate them, and I shouldn't delegate them.
That's good. So what is the like, how does email and scheduling, do you delegate most of your email, or do you do it personally?
I wish. No. A lot of that is just accepting what I don't need to pay attention to. So that's a bit of my value system in a way, is that, I should only focus on my top priorities. And so really that's probably 10% of the noise that comes at us. So I'm really good at forgiving myself. So every morning I'll say, I forgive you for all of the mistakes you're about to make, all of the emails you're about to not answer, all of the people that might be frustrated with you. I go in with that mindset that I'm really not going to finish everything. And so I don't have a huge conflict about that, but I have good communication with folks. Like, this is what I will respond to, and this is, probably what I won't respond to.
That's great. And I love how you kind of pulled in expectation. Like, you cannot meet everybody's expectations. There will always be people that are disappointed if you're leading. And so it's like the prioritization, when the first things are first and they're right, it changes everything. And you mentioned a little bit of like what you do in the morning. I know that you had shared with me before that you have a morning routine that you kind of walk through. Can you share a little bit of that? Like some helpful tips for the first thing in the day that you feel like help you get in the right frame of mind for work, for family, and productivity?
Yeah, I like to break things down, right? Because when I wake up, I'm kind of lost. What am I supposed to focus on? So one of the things that I do is I go through the Lord's Prayer, and I do several things throughout that. But the most important piece of it is when I say, give us this day our daily bread. That to me is really important. I sort of imagine, like, if I could ask for one thing, if I could ask for help in one area of my life today, what would it be? And it forces me. I know God will give us many things. It's not that we have to restrict ourselves to one, but doing that exercise of, if I had one piece of manna today, what would that be? And often it's, today it was this, honestly, it was, let me speak the right words. But sometimes it's handling a conflict. Often it's handling a conflict, things that are just beyond me that I just can't fix on my own. Then I say, that, and it always comes to me because I take that time, and it doesn't take long, but what is my daily bread? And I sometimes look at my calendar, and I will very quickly see what is that one thing that I need help with. And it really centers me. And it also lifts a huge burden off of my shoulders, because, leaning, I'm not leading, I'm leaning, I'm in this. And by the way, what I'll say to all of this is these are the best practices, and probably 75% of the time, or 90 or 99, I fall short, right? So, on a good day, I should say, I'm following this, and it's my goal, and the days go much better with that.
Yeah. I think the other thing too is like with the concept of the best practices is like we all have a tendency to fall off the horse, like we drift. And if you know where you're coming back to, it makes it a lot easier to come back. Because I find like, even Stacy and I have jokes. Sometimes you go on vacation and you're doing great until you get on vacation. You come back and you're like, oh, it's 3 months later. I never got back in after vacation. And I think that routine, those habits, when you have the ideal, it's so much easier to bring it back to what the baseline is. One other thing that we had talked about is the Prayer of Jabez. And I love that you shared that, because I also prayed that prayer. And I'd love for you just to talk about that, because I think that there is a real significance to this particular prayer.
Yes. Yeah. So I learned about Jabez early on after I became a Christian, and he's this little character in the Book of Chronicles. You'd almost skip over it, right? And he's in this big list of names, as you know. And the one thing he does that's very different is he prays. He asks for something, and it's huge. What he asked for is huge, actually. So after I go through the Lord's Prayer, then I pray the Prayer of Jabez, which my version of it says, Lord, bless me indeed, expand my territory, keep evil from me, that I may feel no pain and do no harm. May your hand be on me. And those are all like huge things, like bless me indeed, not just bless me. May your hand be on me. Like, wow, like today, the hand of God could be on me. Wow, could be directing me. That's incredible. And we can ask for that. That's so cool. And then just that feeling of protection, he'll protect us anyway, but just to say it, I feel like a force field, like comes up around my whole home and my family and my work and everything. And it's just an incredibly peaceful prayer for me.
That's really good. I think, when I look back on our journey as a church and the role that God has given to me as a pastor, I can see so many things that God has done in conjunction with that prayer. Doors He's opened, ways He's blessed us. And it's just so simple and practical. I think sometimes, regardless of what, a person's faith background is, sometimes we all come to the conversation about God with these beliefs about what God is really like. And the thing I love about the prayer of Jabez is it's a reminder for my heart that God is a good God that wants to bless our lives. And sometimes it's a matter of us actually asking for His blessing and His favor, and He gives it to us.
Yeah.
And so I love that. I would love to transition to the third category,
Yes.
Which is tempting. And I'd love for you to talk about, like, what are the things that are on that tempting bucket for you that you wish you could do more of, but you have to say no to?
Yeah. So what I'll say also is the time breakdown. My ideal time breakdown of these different quadrants is I'd like to spend 75% of my time on the P1s, 20% on the P2s, and then I give myself a little leeway with the P3s, maybe 5%. Only because the P3s are so hard, so tempting. So I would say tempting in a bad way, actually, not in a good way. It's not that I wish I could do more of this. It's that these are the influences of the world that are calling me, that I need to put up a wall against. But they're not toxic. They're just temptations. Often they come in the form of two things. One is people pleasing. So what are the things that come to me that other people want me to do, but really are not mine? I shouldn't do them. And I'll give examples. And then the other things are ways that we medicate ourselves. So whatever that is, whether that's alcohol or, too much food or whatever your temptation is that you need to be careful of, those are those things too. But in the first bucket of people pleasing, I'm a huge people pleaser. I mean, it's something I fight against all of my life. And now that I've gotten into more ministry activities, there's a lot of people that come to me and want me to do a podcast or do a blog or come speak. And I'm always tempted to say yes. And then I have to ask myself, why am I saying yes? Am I saying yes because I want the visibility, or I like the kudos, that I like the attention? Often it is that. And so I have to just ask myself, what is the cause? Is this a people pleasing thing? And if it truly is, and it's not something that I feel called to do, or it maybe conflicts with my values, it might be a different angle that I don't align with, then I need to say no to that. And that's hard to do. On the self-medication front, it's probably eating, just being too lazy, those things will derail the P1s and P2s, right? Yeah. So those are those things.
That's really good. And I like how you broke down a good thing. And then you kind of gave that extra layer to it, because sometimes we can just immediately jump to something that's good and not realize that the motivation behind doing the good thing is off. And it reminds me, we have a phrase here we use in our culture. It says, if we do the right thing for the right reason, for the right length of time, you get the right result. And it's easy, I think, a lot of times to do the right thing for the wrong reason. And it produces a harvest in our lives that eventually can become toxic. And even I like how you broke down your own personal journey with that, because probably for all of us, based on our own wiring, that temptation could be a little bit different. Like I find myself, one of my temptations is distracting myself on my phone. Like I love a really clean inbox. And there's something I find myself, even like at times when I'm at home with my kids and they're fighting with each other, I'm tempted to pick up my phone and clear text messages and emails because it's like, here's a good thing that I should do during the workday, but it's a temptation. I wonder if there's anything like for you that is, so the way I was processing this, but I maybe I'm not, now that you talked about the bad side of a good thing, do you ever find, like in a company, like for an entrepreneur or somebody who's innovative, sometimes the things that we eventually pursue start as a distraction? Like it's like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder, how do you discern if something is like, has eventually could become a P1, P2, but right now it's P3 and it's a little tempting. Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, absolutely. Those things that don't fall under the plan, that
Yeah.
just come in at you, and you might be tempted to do them. I think if you're tempted, that could be a P1, that could be God or whoever you believe, directing you in that path. Like, go see what this problem is all about. Go tinker over here.
Yeah.
So that's where prayer for me would come into place. I'd say, like, is this a distraction, or is this, this is actually my purpose? Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
and then it's clearly a P1. And I do most of my innovation, most of my experimentation is in that P1 bucket, because if it's not, you're not going to make time for it.
Yeah.
When a problem falls in my lap, an example is, we're working to make our language at Salesforce more inclusive in our products. So identifying terms that are maybe not non-inclusive, that are more kind of industry standard. How do we fix those? It's a huge problem. And that was raised in the middle of the year last year. And we were like, who's going to own this? Who's going to step up? I was really tempted to step up. And I had to ask myself, is that because I want to be seen as this inclusivity leader? Or is it because I want to solve the problem? And I just kind of sat with it and prayed about it and decided to throw my hat in the ring and lead that problem. And that required a lot of innovation. So I think that's often the hand of God, in my view, leading you toward innovation. But the way you can check that, but beyond prayer, would be, what problem are you solving? Is this an actual problem?
Yeah.
Often we'll say, like, oh, I'm going to create this great website, or I'm going to teach this class, or I'm going to put a workshop together, but there's no need for it. There's like 800 other workshops just like that out there. And we want to solve it because we are interested in it. But I say, go start with the problem, start with the market need, and then invest in time. But yeah, I probably 25% of my time I try to reserve for innovation and experimentation.
That's great. How much of your schedule would you say you, on a typical week, would make white space, like where there's just nothing there?
We luckily at Salesforce, we have something called No Interruption Thursdays, which is
that's
the best thing ever.
Yeah.
And we block our calendars Thursday, and sometimes it gets overridden, but we take that really seriously. Wellness is a top value for all employees at Salesforce. So I try to block that time off. And then the weekends, I almost never schedule something on the weekends. And then when I do get those requests of my time from other companies, I'm really strict about, I can meet from 8 to 8:30, most days of the week. But I almost never let it come into my day. So I have some rules.
That's good. That's really good. I like that Thursday rule as well. It's so in those days there should be no Zooms meeting or no video conferences or meetings. It's like deep work type stuff.
Yeah, it's whatever it is. Often it's light work. It's all the like annoying to-dos that you never got to during the week. Sometimes it's hard work, but I sometimes do that on the weekends, even when I need to do more thinking. But yeah, I do try to reserve that time.
That's awesome. I'd love to kind of wrap up and go to the fourth and final bucket, because that has some huge ramifications to it. The bucket of things that are toxic.
Yeah.
So tell us about that.
The one other thing I want to say about tempting is, this is where a lot of self-forgiveness comes into play, because it's very, very, very hard to say no to something that's tempting. And so you will mess up and you will say yes to those all of the time. And you definitely should be forgiving ourselves and just applauding any baby step that we can take toward that.
That's really good.
Toxic for me, in my life, it comes in the form of people often. So someone that's narcissistic, that's manipulative, whether that's someone at work, frankly, or, someone even in ministry, someone in my personal life, they keep popping up, and I think they always will. For whatever reason. And I used to be more of a people pleaser with that. And then I learned some techniques over the past few years, how to identify that type of kind of personality that probably has some issues that, is bringing those issues into my life. So identifying that, and then using a particular technique I have called the bounce back to push it out of my life. But just not even letting it get a foothold.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be a person, it could be a program that just got dumped on you, that you just accepted, went from tempting, and now it's become toxic because it's, infecting your day, it's infecting your family time, it's the wrong project, there's no need for it, it's, maybe it's there to compete with another project. So it's usually people or projects that you've accepted and you shouldn't have.
That's good. Have you ever read the book Necessary Endings by Henry Cloud?
Mm-mm.
It's about this, and he unpacks a lot of I think you'd find it really interesting, but it is essentially, how do you, some things in life are supposed to end, and when there's death, there's new life, and sometimes you don't realize a relationship is toxic or a project is toxic until you get in.
Yep.
And I think being willing to make the tough decisions to, like, okay, I need to change, I need to draw boundaries. How do you discern initially if it's a relationship that you just have to draw boundaries versus, like, this is a toxic situation I'm in?
Yeah, good question, because a lot of people might be thinking, well, I have somebody toxic in my life, but they happen to be a really close family member, might be a parent, might be a child. You can't just, it's not that easy.
Right.
So I think when it's that type of situation, then it is more about drawing boundaries, like once that argument starts, just say, I'm not going to engage, and sticking to that. Maybe not answering the phone, maybe not calling them back, maybe deciding, like, I'm only going to call this person back on Saturday in the afternoon when I'm ready, when I'm good and ready, and one of the biggest things on drawing those boundaries is pushing back every time it happens. Every time they violate a boundary for you, is calling them out on it. There's really, that's the most efficient way to fix it, in my experience, is saying, you just rolled your eyes at me.
Yeah.
And you call out something that you observe, you just interrupted me. And my expectation is that you won't interrupt me.
That's really good.
So I do that. And then, but if it is somebody in your life that you don't have to deal with in that way, it's unlikely to get better.
Right.
I like to think of it really as a cancer, as something that will be toxic in your life. And once it gets a foothold, as we all know, it can actually derail everything.
Yeah.
That bad relationship, right, can derail certainly your P3s, your P2s, your P1s, where you're spending 75% of your life in the P4, in the toxic, and very little in your purpose. Very little in those kind of healthy habits that we need to do to stay well.
That's really good. One other thing I would add to that is, I think once you've walked through a toxic situation, there has to be on the back end some time to, like, process and say, okay, what did I learn, and how do I not let what I walk through attach to me? Because I think what I've experienced is, if I don't close things and even sometimes go see a counselor, get therapy, get help, bitterness or fear or, a lot of different emotions can get attached to us. And then we start leading from wounds in future relationships. And I just think there's so much wisdom to what you're saying here, and getting out of that as quick as possible. So, I know that we're pretty much running out of time here. I'm so grateful for you investing in us today. I'd love for you to briefly share, where can people go to get more information about you, to learn some of the resources you have? And even, I know that there are some churches that maybe would love to have access to some of the trainings that you've already done that are online.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. It's been great to be here. The place to find me would be leanership.org. So that's with an N instead of a D. And I've got all of the materials there, and you can reach out to me there. You can also ping me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to make new connections.
Awesome. And some of your story is there on your site. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And kind of your journey to follow Jesus and all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to share that with anyone who wants to hear it. But the 10-second version is, I grew up pretty anti-religious in a really religious environment, and I was very anti-religious, and then, pursued a lot of other forms of success and had a lot of success. We have a great family, great job, but I was really missing something in my life and pursued other things to solve it. But luckily, many things happened to kind of lead me to one place, and that was about 4 years ago when I ended up converting to Christianity.
That's awesome. And one of the things I love about your story and your journey is how you're integrating your faith into the workplace in a way that is not judgmental, it's not drawing walls, it's more building bridges. And so thank you so much for being a good example of what it means to be a follower of Jesus in the workforce and making a difference with your life. And thank you so much for investing in us today. It's been a huge blessing. I've learned a ton. I look forward to going back through and writing more notes down and capturing what we've talked about today. It's been a great time together. Thank you, Sue.
Thanks for having me.
Wow, there was so much wisdom in that conversation. Thank you, Sue, for investing in us, helping us get better as leaders. I hope for you, you were stirred and challenged by that conversation. I know for me that there's times when there are toxic people and areas of my life that I need to make tough decisions. I want to encourage you right now to pull out a pen and a piece of paper and let's apply what we've learned today. Perhaps even write down some things that you can do, steps you can take this week in response to this great conversation that we just had together. Now, again, if you haven't subscribed, we want to encourage you to do that. Like and share this content. I believe it can help you. It can help the leaders on your team. And let's continue to get better as leaders. When we get better as leaders, everything around us wins, our team wins, our organization wins, and that's why we are so committed to continue to help you. So if we can help in any way, you get the ball down the field, we want to do that. Again, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Echo Leadership Podcast.